Welcome, dear chosen ones. If you ever want to find out who you really are, watch how you act when everything around you stinks of betrayal. That's not just a quote. It's both a spiritual mirror and a chosen one. You did not just pass the test. You rewrote the manual on how to survive such a horrific situation. Even the devil definitely took notes. Because let's face it, most people collapse, slap back, or become absolutely petty when faced with deceit, public humiliation, or backdoor sabotage. But you handle the matter so well that people are now talking behind your back. Not to slander you, but to watch you quietly, jealously, and honestly with some surprise. Here's a bizarre fact. According to psychological research, how people respond to abuse has a greater influence on individuals than the maltreatment itself. This indicates that no one was watching what happened to you. They were watching you. Your every action, response, and silence. This was not weakness, but battle. You did not just negotiate a difficult situation. You got through it. And now the same people who try to bring you down are fumbling their storylines, while the audience they expected to turn against you is happy, surprised, and even inspired. Some say, "I'm not sure what they have inside of them, but I want it." Others must have had instruction from monks, Navy SEALs, or an angel with a clipboard. However, the truth is simpler and more sacred. You were born for this. So let's get it all out. Brutally honest, deeply entrenched truths of how you handled the ugly tempest with royalty and war paint, and why the world can't stop watching your rise. Let's get to it. For starters, you didn't merely tolerate the humiliation. You made it. Keep an eye on your progress. When most people are publicly humiliated or subjected to anything unpleasant, they either withdraw in humiliation or shout in defense. They either disintegrate quietly or explode loudly. But you didn't do either. You did not let it to devour you. You did not shrink or spiral. You stood there, clear-eyed and calm, and then rose. That's what surprised them. That is what quiets the whole room. You didn't merely tolerate the mess. You made it. Keep track of your progress. They designed the situation to destroy you in front of an audience. That was the entire goal. Rumor, drama, and slander. It was all set up like a stage show, with you expecting to falter under pressure. They felt they could crush your soul and then alter the tale to make it seem as if you had impacted them. They were counting on your collapse to back up their lies. But you didn't collapse. You kept your back straight. You did not bother responding to half of what they threw at you. And it led many to explore further. That's when neutrals started saying, "Wait a minute, this person isn't who they made them out to be." You didn't say anything, but your energy told the whole story. You made it through the unpleasantness with your character intact. That's a different kind of victory. It is not the kind that draws applause. It's the kind that makes people doubt everything they've learned about you. You became undeniable. And now the people who try to humiliate you can't look you in the eye. They witnessed you go through hell and come out unharmed. This is why people are amazed. That is why your opponents are mute now, knowing they could not have done what you did with half the elegance you shown. And regardless of what others think, they saw what you become. You emerged swiftly in the face of the carnage they had inflicted. You didn't just handle it. You made a disaster of your debut. Number 2, you made dignity seem dangerous. You didn't yell. You didn't rant. You did not send long emotional essays or try to react with receipts. Nonetheless, the way you carried yourself caught people's attention. Your own composure, that quiet, almost unsettling dignity, became your most potent response. You did not act out, and your silence did not imply weakness. It was exact. It was power. You did not just walk through that dreadful situation with grace. You made grace seem frightening. People expected a scene. They expected you to crack, lose control, and confirm the lies being peddled about you. This was the setup. Provoke you until you explode, then remark, "See, notice how shaky they are." But you didn't fall for it. You did not provide the answer they anticipated. And the fact that you kept calm in the face of such turmoil rattled them more than any shout could. The truth is that your restraint worried them because it revealed that you had much more control than they did. You did not panic. You weren't desperate. You were locked in a condition of tranquility, assurance, and unconcern that made no sense, especially considering the chaos they were attempting to unleash on you. When others saw it, they stopped looking at you as if you were a problem and started to wonder what kind of power it needed to move that way. You didn't need to defend yourself since your energy spoke for itself. People may feel you are not guilty. They realized something was awry. Not with you, but with the story being told about you. And that's when everything started to shift. People admired you because you refused to fight dirty, not because you did. You did not have to toss your hands to get them off. You just stood there, head held high, lips shut, unshaken. And this scared them. You made dignity look like a threat. And now, even in silence, you transmit volumes. Because anybody can stand in the middle of a throng without flinching. That is not a person to laugh at. That is someone you should either respect or avoid. Third, they told the dirtiest narrative. But you become the proof. They lied. They devised the perfect untruth. It was smart, varied, and convincing enough to make others reconsider what they thought they knew about you. They practiced it, promoted it, and even had others sign it. And you didn't shout. You did not persuade others to accept your views. You just proceeded to be true to yourself day after day. And this is exactly what derailed their whole performance. The truth is, they expected you to react in a way that made their story make sense. They depicted you as unstable, manipulative, false, or bitter, whatever suited the plot. All you had to do was demonstrate it once, and they'd say, "See, I've told you." But you didn't. You refused to give them that moment. You did not perform the portion that had been written for you. You stayed strong, grounded, and detached from the chaos. This is what raised people's suspicions. Because your behaviors evolved over time and did not match their tale. You were not making shady movements. You weren't messy. You weren't seeking retribution. You were just consistent. And that consistency punched holes in the whole storyline. It caused others to pay closer attention and question why the individual they were seeking to damage seemed calmer than others tossing dirt. That's when everything started to unravel. You didn't defend yourself. Your energy did. Your life started to convey the truth more clearly than words could. The way you carried yourself, the calm you kept, and the progress you made. It became evidence that could not be removed. You weren't trying to be a saint. You were only being truthful. And your genuineness revealed their lies without even trying. They manufactured a falsehood, but you were the proof that it never existed. Every time you entered a room with your head held high, more of their story was exposed. Every time you stayed polite, calm, and attentive, their tale became increasingly difficult to believe. And now the truth has been disclosed. Not because you screamed it, but because you lived it. You did not have to disclose them. They showed themselves when you refused to descend. Number 4, they thought they were burying you, but really planted the blueprint. They anticipated that the lies, betrayal, and setup would be the last of you. They honestly believed they were writing your last moment and sealing it with shame. They did not realize they were not burying you. They were planting you. And you didn't just survive underground. You adjusted and rooted yourself. You became stronger in the calm. And you rose differently, smarter, sharper, and unstoppable. They misjudged what happens when someone has nothing left to prove and everything to create. They expected you to be buried by gossip, false rumors, and character assassination. But instead, you used everything as material. You did not deny the agony. You processed it. You studied it. You turned your anguish into a strategy. You have accidentally become a blueprint. People are paying close attention to you, not because they anticipate you to fail again, but because they can't figure out how you didn't. They'd heard of your death, but the method in which you rebuilt, quiet, intentional, powerful, that is something you cannot fake. That is not something you can copy without earning it. It came from pressure, depth, and experience. Nobody saw, but you got through. You never became bitter. You did not come back angry. You returned structured. And now the ones who wanted to break you are stuck watching. You become a model for resilience. You are not someone whom people feel sorry for. You're someone they're learning from, and the filth that once embarrassed you is now nourishing others. People say that if they can recover from it, so can I. You were never buried. You were built. And now you're live proof that you can not only overcome sabotage, but also use it to teach others how to win quietly. You haven't just recovered. You turned your sadness into a method. You turned chaos into curriculum. Those who intended to ruin you left an inadvertent legacy. Number 5, you were underwhelmed by their disarray. That is what shook them. They brought mayhem to your door, as if it were a guaranteed ticket to your death. They threw shade, gossip, manipulation, dirty tactics, and whatever else they could think of to undermine your foundation. But they never anticipated you to be so unimpressed with everything. You didn't flinch. You didn't fold. You gazed at the mess, blinked once, then carried on as if nothing had occurred. And this shocked them to their core. They were waiting for a breakdown. They were counting for a reaction. Are you having a breakdown in public? Are you calling everyone out? You are spinning, lashing out, and becoming bitter. That was supposed to be your response because they felt that if they could create enough uncertainty and emotional stress, you would collapse. Instead, you marched forward into the flames without raising your voice. That's when it hit them. They no longer had any control over you. Your demeanor indicated their desperation. Your refusal to get drawn into their drama exposed how disorganized they were while planning, performing, and twisting strings. You were focused on staying grounded. They tried every horrible way they could think of, but none of them disturbed your peace. You didn't even argue. You just did not participate. That lack of reactivity did not constitute a vulnerability. That was power in its purest form. Because standing in the middle of a storm and refusing to dance with the drama is not passive. That is presence. That is alignment. That is what made them nervous. They can no longer exert control over something they cannot disrupt. They cannot rule anything that does not seek their consent. You reveal that their distress only affects people who do not know who they are. And you finish the inner work. Your article isn't performative. It's real. You did not disregard the mess. You were flying above it. And that alone broke their sense of authority. You didn't have to fight for control since it was already on the inside and couldn't be moved. Number 6, you didn't clean up the mess. You allow it to reveal who they really are. You knew what they were doing. You saw the setup from the beginning. They wanted to draw you into their drama so you could spend your time proving you're not who they made you out to be. They wanted you to worry about cleaning up their mess so they could keep their shiny image. But you didn't play along. You didn't defend yourself. When they twisted the facts, you did not hurry to clear your name or resolve the matter. You let the dirt sit. You permitted the lies to spread. And most importantly, you let them express themselves. That degree of self-control. It's unusual because when someone attacks your character, your normal reaction is to defend, explain, and prove it. But you already knew the truth. And you knew that the more you shouted, the more it would seem like you had something to hide. So you took a step backward. You let the noises to play out. You did not interrupt the performance. You merely saw it from a distance. And while they were busy performing, they started to make mistakes. Their disparities were clear. Their projections started to disintegrate. And the very people they were seeking to convince came to appreciate the beauty of not touching the message, which forces them to trace the aroma back to its source. As time passed, it became apparent that you were not the one spreading dirt. You did not need to make accusations. You let their inconsistent behavior do the heavy lifting. People eventually began to see it for what it was. Not because you described it, but precisely because you did not. You trusted time. You trusted the truth and thought that those who needed to hear the whole story would eventually do so, without having to twist yourself into emotional knots to get them there. That is maturity. That is discipline. You did not clean up their messes. You let it fester long enough to reveal who did it. And the stench will no longer accompany you. It's hanging on to them. Number 7. You did not perform for compassion. You personified sovereignty. You had every right to break down in front of the whole world. You had every reason to express your pain and evoke sympathy, just like likes on a post. But you didn't. You did not use sadness to persuade others. You did not submit your wounds for approval. You didn't turn your grief into a performance. You stood upright, even though your knees trembled. And that alone set you apart from the crowd, while others sought for attention by crafting the ideal poor me story. You calmly chose truth above theatricality. You did not fabricate your story to get compassion. You owned it without sugarcoating or selling it for accolades. That sort of strength is distinctive. It isn't loud, but it's enough to make people pause and think about what they thought strength looked like. You were not interested in being rescued since you had already saved yourself. You did not wait for the rescue team. You were building your own ladder out of the pit. They tried to leave you inside. You didn't ask for anybody else's understanding since you understood yourself. And it horrified those who only know how to function by seeking attention and acceptance. You didn't need any of it. You merely needed the truth. And you stood there as if it were armor. People respect you, but they are also concerned since you are not a victim of your story. You're the author. You do not carry your pain around like a trophy. You've lived through it. You grow from it. You endure it graciously. And the same people who tried to ridicule you now stare at you, wondering how you managed to go through it all while keeping your head up. Never fail. You did not need an audience. You didn't need a pity party. You needed your dignity. And you will not let it go. That isn't just strange. That constitutes sovereignty. It speaks louder than any collapse. Number 8. Your self-control wasn't passive. It was exact warfare. They perceived your tranquility for weakness. They interpreted your stillness as confusion. They thought that since you were not clapping back, reacting aggressively, or causing a ruckus, you were uneducated. But the truth is that you were 10 steps ahead the whole time. Your self-control was purposeful, not passive. You were always quiet. Each time you choose not to participate. Every hesitation to lower oneself was an intentional decision. You were never out of the loop. You were just playing chess while the rest were busy playing checkers. They came at you emotionally, expecting you to respond emotionally. That was the trap. They anticipated you to lose control as the volume increased. But you didn't. You held your ground. Not because you were terrified, but because you understand how power works. True strength does not flinch. It does not pursue noise. It watches, calculates, and moves when the moment is right. Every choice you made throughout their circus act was surgical. You were not trying to impress the crowd. You were remaining calm while building the basis for your ascension. The interesting thing is that they were focused on short-term profits, attention, and little accomplishments. You were producing something true, quietly, wisely, and deliberately. Now, the games they played are deteriorating. Falsehoods are dissolving. The manipulation is starting to show. As decaying fruit ripens and attracts flies, you have been fermenting, evolving, and changing. What they deemed a weakness was really knowledge. They called it softness, but it was really a kind of sharpness. They didn't know how to read. You did not need to show your strength. You embodied it. And now, without raising a finger, your very presence bothers them because they have finally acknowledged it. You were not only calm, you were also calculating. You didn't say. It suddenly sounds louder than everything else. They shouted. That is not passivity. That is precise. That is war on a whole other level. And you just want it. Number 9. You left the game without telling anybody. You didn't storm out. You did not pound on the door. You didn't make a big deal about how you were done with them. You just stopped explaining, stopped entertaining, and stopped reacting. And the quiet departure puzzled them since they were expecting a conflict. They were willing to fight for more back and forth in order to appease their egos in one more scenario. But you did not offer them anything. There is no closure or warning, just silence in your absence. That's when the terror set in, since individuals like feeding off the responses of others. They want you to be emotionally involved, whether you are furious, in pain, or puzzled. They'll feel important as long as you perform. So when you stop playing the role they assigned you, or just leave their little stage, you dispel the notion that you are no longer their character. You've reclaimed your script. You didn't have to state your boundaries since you embodied them. You did not need to defend your distance since your energy plainly showed that access was denied. You did not disregard them. You grew. You had progressed beyond the point where their chaos could reach you. And the best part, you didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need them to understand. You just let your absence expose the reality. They couldn't hear if you were still available. That is the kind of power that is seldom discussed, withdrawal as a means of protection rather than punishment. You didn't retreat to prove your argument. You quit because the game was no longer worth your attention. You noticed both the cycle and the modification. You detected a trend, and rather than trying to correct or address it, you just released it. They're now sitting in confusion, trying to figure out what occurred. Do you know what has changed? You were tired of dancing to music that never recognized your merits. So you disengaged from the performance. And with that one subtle movement, their whole sense of control disintegrated. You didn't ruin any relationships. You just walked away from the stage. Number 10. They gave you rubbish, but you didn't touch it long enough to detect the stink. They threw you garbage, insults, lies, manipulation, and deceit. They wanted you to grab, wear, and react to it. That was the trap, to make you feel so offended and dehumanized that you began behaving in ways that supported the dirt they were seeking to sling on you. But you didn't fall for it. You recognized it for what it was. You observed that if you picked it up or tossed it back, you'd be covered with it. So you didn't touch it. You left it where it fell. You did not protect yourself with the same low blows that they used. You did not try to poison them just to feel powerful. You have the emotional acumen to see that some conflicts are hardly more than chances to lose oneself. And you are not going to give up your essence to win an argument. That's what people miss. They think that strength is about responding. But you displayed moderation based on clarity. You did not need revenge. You needed space, and you got it quietly and completely. This is the kind of power that does not need noise. You didn't mimic their bitterness, duplicate their dysfunction, or absorb their projections since you knew the stuff wasn't yours. Just because someone throws rubbish at you doesn't mean you should pick it up. You were honest to yourself, which is why you came out clean. Yes, it stung. Yes. Were you angry? Yes. You had moments of confusion and sadness, yet you chose not to act on those sentiments. You didn't let it affect your identity. You knew your ideas. You knew your personality, and you weren't about to let a passing storm take you into permanent soil. The episode has passed, and you are still emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually well. Meanwhile, the junk they threw remains where they left it. Only now can everyone see whose hands it really came from. You did not contradict what happened. You just did not let it change who you are. That is why you are clean, while others are buried in the muck they created. You discovered a corrupt system. Without ever recognizing identities. You could have gone to scorched earth. You could have detailed every person, lie, and twisted action used to make you the villain in their corrupt system. You had every reason to, yet you choose not to. You chose a route that most others cannot grasp. You let your truth do the exposing without ever mentioning anybody by name. That made your impact even more clear. Because the moment you started living your naked, unfiltered truth, the system they built began to fall on its own, not because you disclosed it via rage, but because your life no longer matched the one they advertised to others. The disparity between your excitement and their tale became too much to ignore. People began to notice the inconsistencies. They saw your tranquility, clarity, and consistency and questioned why someone so grounded was seen as a threat. That's when a mask started to slip. You did not have to reveal any secrets. You were both the revelation and the breaking point in the deception. And as you continued to walk truthfully, the lies started to unravel themselves. They miscalculated the strength of your pure energy. You did not need to shout from the rooftops. You did not have to put up a show. All you needed to do was be honest. Suddenly, their whole arrangement became risky. It became clear that the problem wasn't yours. The people who were trying so hard to quiet you revealed how well coordinated their actions were by refusing to match their approaches and not playing their games. You didn't want to hurt anybody, yet your healing and honesty achieved more than any rant could. It showed what corruption, projection, and cowardice look like when they don't produce the intended result. You became the litmus test, and without saying a single word, you captured everyone's attention. And the quiet exposure spoke louder than any headline. Because if truth remains immobile for long enough, all lies eventually topple over themselves. And this is exactly what happened. A number. You didn't wait for justice. You become the evidence. You figured it out early. The system meant to protect you was never created for someone like you. It wasn't simply flawed. It was twisted, biased, and in some cases complicit. You might have waited for someone to step in. You may have encouraged someone to finally confess, "Hey, this person is innocent." However, this was improper. But you knew better. So instead of expecting for assistance, you did something much more powerful. You become the evidence. You stopped trying to explain your position. You stopped expecting someone to dig through the sludge and disclose the truth to you. You realized that the only way forward was via your own growth. So you were a living contradiction to everything they said about you, while they invented stories to bury you. You were building something more powerful than words, a life they couldn't deny. You turned your existence into proof. That is the part they cannot deny. You endured more than simply the scandal, slander, and deceit. You grew through it. People may receive the feeling that even if they don't know everything, your presence is important. No, it provides clarity. It exudes a serene authority that no trial could ever provide. You stopped seeking external acceptance because you acknowledged your own inner peace, growth, and healing. That was the verdict. People are slowly awakening. They are reliving what happened. They re-examined what they had heard, and they're realizing that the story they were sold doesn't represent who you are today. That's when the doubts kicked in. That's when the questioning begins. Because your life does not fit into the categories they attempted to impose on you. You did not need the system to purify your name. You cleared it by showing up every day. In honesty, strength, and tranquility. No press conference, no spectacle. Simply unmistakable proof that you are not who they claimed. You're better. And now, the same system that failed to protect you is passively observing your success, unable to alter who you have become. The living, breathing evidence that the truth did not need defending. It just needed time. A number. You didn't ask to be seen. You made people look at themselves. You never entered a room asking for confirmation. You did not seek attention, sympathy, or approval. You didn't ask anybody to believe you, understand your point of view, or acknowledge your worth. You just stood in your truth, quietly and completely, and this alone made many people uncomfortable. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your presence reminded them of everything they did. You became a mirror without trying. You just were calm, collected, and grounded. You reflected the lies, cowardice, and brutality that they imagined would be hidden. The same people who attempted to undermine you were uncomfortable in your presence. Not because they were ready to own their guilt, but because being near you made it more difficult for them to keep believing you didn't have to confront them. Your article worked for you. There is something immensely unsettling about being around someone who does not fight dirty, lash out, or try to retaliate. Despite this, I came out unhurt. It prompts people to reflect about the games they played and the lengths they went to break. Someone who does not deserve it. You didn't need to say anything. Your passion prompted others to look within. For others, this was terrible. You weren't trying to be a martyr or a hero. You were only trying to live with your dignity intact. And somehow, that survival became a spiritual spotlight, revealing what others tried to conceal. Your presence exposes others. It tells who has evolved and who is still performing, who lives really and who hides behind projection. That is why some people admire you, while others avoid you. Because of the strength necessary to heal without becoming bitter, to continue forward without vengeance, and to keep your dignity even when no one saw it. That type of power drives people to question their own character. You not only survived, but you became a symbol of what they did, of what they allowed, about who they are when no one is looking. You have never begged to be noticed. They can no longer avoid seeing you. They can't unsee themselves either. A number. Your strength wasn't in fighting back. It was your resistance to sinking. They tried everything to pull you down. Lies, manipulation, and humiliation. All intended to upset you, induce vengeance, and get you into their ugly little war. They were hoping for a large enough response to validate the tale they had already sold. The goal was not merely to hurt you, but to change you into something little, nasty, and unrecognizable. But you didn't buy it. You had a wonderful opportunity to answer back. You had every reason to expose them, drag them through the same mud they had flung at you, and gather a crowd to see. But you chose not to. Not because you didn't have any evidence. Not because you weren't angry. But you did understand something. They didn't. Just because someone throws poison does not mean you must swallow it to prove it is hazardous. You didn't consider that your greatest strength. You remained stationary while others scrambled. You were morally bankrupt after remaining mute while they fabricated stories, trying to destroy your reputation. You flew above it. Refusing to lower oneself was not an indication of weakness. It was self-mastery. That shocked them more than any verbal disagreement could. What you did was revolutionary, since most individuals do not choose that road. Most people respond to fire with fire, which results in scorch. But you responded with presence, quietness, and elevation. You didn't need retaliation since your life had become a counterattack. You did not need to clap back. Your growth, tranquility, and resilience did all the talking. Those who wanted you to fail are now watching you triumph. Those who wanted to see you enraged are now seeing you walk in peace. And those who once believed the worst of you, they are reconsidering because what you achieved was more than just breathtaking. It was evident. You proved that power isn't loud. It is not petty. The real strength is restraint. It's knowing exactly what they deserve but refusing to conform to their level. That's why everyone is whispering right now. Because you didn't just win. You soared in a way that redefined what winning looks like. Allow them to talk. Allow them to wonder. Allow them to replay each occurrence in their imaginations, attempting to figure out how you survived what was intended to kill you and came out stronger, wiser, and cleaner. Because the truth is, you did not just tolerate the filth. You exceeded it. You didn't just evade their traps. You made those traps irrelevant. You didn't stoop. You didn't shout. And you didn't drown. You rose gently, intentionally, and firmly. The same individuals who tried to bury you are now experiencing something they don't comprehend. They didn't think it was possible for you to be that person. A version that stayed stable even when everything around you tried to drag you out of sync. You did not disclose them with words. You exposed them via discipline. You didn't demand justice. You were an embodiment of divine justice in action. And now you are the blueprint. Not because you convinced people to believe your story, but because you lived it so authentically. That truth became clear where your restraint was louder than their chaos. Your honesty, along with your refusal to respond, made the manipulation seem horrible. That broke the foundation of everything they had constructed. People aren't just impressed. They are awakening. They're figuring out what actual strength looks like. Not the type that shouts, but the kind that stands firm when everything within you wants to crumble. That sort of courage rewrites stories and resonates. So keep going as if you've already won, because you have, not in the traditional sense of accomplishment, but in the way the soul senses victory. You walked through the muck and stayed clean. You were surrounded by turmoil, yet it did not destroy your spirit. That is not just surviving. That's mastery. And those who know realize that the rest will catch up. If this message spoke to you profoundly, reminding you of your strength, development, and power, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel and become part of a community that sees you, appreciates your journey, and speaks truths that the world does not always want to hear. If you're a live example of how silence can be powerful and healing can be holy, write a comment below and tell us which portion spoke to you the most. Your story might be the lifeline someone else needs right now. So please share this video with someone who has survived the fire and exited uninjured. Let them know they are not alone and that they are not mad for coping with it in the manner they did. Because this isn't just content. This is a confirmation. You are not just surviving. You are in command. You're teaching. You're becoming. And we're just getting started. Welcome to this excursion. Let us continue ascending together. God bless you.